Welcome to Making Shit Up, the podcast by the Quinte Arts Council team where we talk to all kinds of creators about how they got interested in making shit up. You're here with your hosts, Cody, Janet, and Lynn. This week we're talking to Playwright Peter Paylor about how his art form is all about making shit up. Welcome to the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself a little bit, Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter Paylor. I am a playwright. And yeah, I guess I make shit up. So thanks for having me.
Can you tell us where you grew up and what it was like growing up there? And did it affect your art?
Yes, it did, is the answer to the last question. I grew up in Cooksville in the late 50s or early 60s. Cooksville has been swallowed up. It's now part of Mississauga. I'm just beginning to deal with that now. That was in 1967, and I still go with Cooksville. When I was, my parents bought a little tiny wooden house and plunked it down in the middle of nowhere, and I lived there for a couple of years until I moved into a mid-50s suburban brick house and grew up in the early suburbs. When it was still a fairly small place, and I tend to write about small towns, which to some extent, it's where I grew up, is pretty much where I put most of my stuff.
Awesome.
Well, you've come to the perfect little small town to
Yes.
write about.
It's a small urban municipality, as I'm often pointed out.
I stand corrected.
It's a city.
He's giving shit. And when did you move to Belleville?
It's hard to say.
I kind of remember.
Well, I've been back and forth for 40 years.
Okay.
Or so. It's the place I come when, I always came to when life got me down. I had family here, and when things were tough, for whatever reason, this is where I came, and it's been maybe 14 years since I said, okay, this is it. I'm here now. So I guess you can say that.
Yeah.
About 14 years ago.
I remember you had an art show at the Quinte Arts Council.
I did. That was...
It was in your
maybe
carving
12
days.
My carving day. Well, it's funny. I walked into this space looking for a writing group.
Oh, wow.
And Lindy Pierce, who was here at the time, saw this stick sticking out of the back of my backpack and asked me about that. And I ended up with, I was carving at the time, and I ended up, she booked me for an art show here. And at that point, that was sort of the beginning. I was a visual artist primarily for a dozen years or so.
That got you going.
And that got me going, yeah. And I never did find the writing group.
So you made one up.
No, well, yeah, I just figured, writing's a pretty lonely exercise anyway, so I just figured I'll just do that. But when I came in, I was writing short stories and attempting to write long-form fiction. I was not a playwright or even gave it any consideration back then when I walked in here.
Mm-hmm. So the writing group at the Wharf wasn't meeting at that time?
No. I actually there was a writing group at the, people are going to hate me for this because I can't remember now.
The Underground.
The Underground.
Yeah.
And I was actually, I attended the last meeting of the writing group at the Underground. And just as it was about to shut down.
Yeah.
And that was my experience.
I go to Velvet Underground, but it's not Velvet Underground.
Yes.
The Underground.
The Underground.
Yeah.
So if you could go back in time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I'm tempted to say, you can be anything you want and don't worry about, where you're going. But I don't know if I would want to know that. I think if I was to speak to another 18-year-old, I would say, don't worry about where you're going. People seldom end up taking the path that they're thinking about, or I think most of them who do end up unhappy. So, I don't know.
That's a great answer.
So when you were 18, were you writing? Were you a visual artist? What were you doing?
I did a bit of writing when I was 18, mostly just for the, that ended up in a drawer, or as Aaron Sorkin likes to say, really the only reason to write is to impress women. So I did, share some.
It's the only reason.
My 18-year-old self shared some with some.
Some play guitar, some write.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
Well, when I first met you, I always think of you first as a carver. And that's just because when I first met you, I was thinking, well, now all of a sudden he's picking up the pen and he's going to do a play. So we headed to the Pinnacle Playhouse and listened to This Is Rosewood. And I laughed my ass off.
Well,
that was so funny. And there's Richard sitting beside me going, I don't get it. Never been on a board.
Yeah. So that was Rosewood Art Society.
Yes, the Rosewood
Yes,
Art Society.
The Rosewood Art Society, yes. It's interesting you said that because we had our first general meeting of our new theater company last night, and there were two people from the cast of that play there, and everybody, every 10 minutes somebody would say, this is just like the Rosewood Art Society.
We got to get a new mop or something.
Yeah, that's it.
Let's write that into the Constitution. Should review the mop situation
Well, we actually
annually.
had a vacuum cleaner situation come up just before the meeting.
Yeah.
So that did end up in the minutes, I believe.
What was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
I grew up in a family with not a lot of books around. The only books available to me, I shared a bedroom with my two older brothers who were in high school, and my brother's high school English books were always up in the closet, and so at a very young age, I was reading things like, A Man for All Seasons, and books that were studied in high school English classes, and they, just sort of the excitement of reading, especially plays. It was incredible for me. So that's one answer. The second answer is because I write, and now what was the question? Oh, the power of words.
Yes.
So I write, for the most part, I write comedy. So I think an important part of that is the power of words to make people laugh, which I learned early on. I was in one of those ice-breaking games at a conference one time, and there was a question about if you could do anything, what would you do? And I said that I would like to find some alien civilization that doesn't know how to laugh and teach them how.
Awesome.
So that's
Yeah.
always it's my father and my one of my brothers influenced that was important to us to laugh.
Well, you have a couple of, all three of us are communications writers at the table. And I have to say comedy's it's not in my strength at all. It's not an easy gig. Has there ever been a time when when one of your jokes just didn't fly?
Oh, more than one time. And that's, I've learned that to always have people read out loud your work, because the first time you hear it out loud, you can usually tell what doesn't work, and I get to leave that off, out, and the audiences don't have to listen to it. But yes, I'm trying to think of an example, but
It'll come to you.
Yeah.
Someone ever emailed you later and said, I was not impressed, I was offended, or no?
Yeah.
For the most part, it's pretty funny.
For the most part, sometimes I expect people to be offended. I have one play called Tea with Roger that has a couple of lines in it that I always expect to people to be offended, but we've done it in probably half a dozen churches now, and I'm always waiting. And I've never had any problem. That line always gets a big laugh. So,
Can you tell us a little bit about your research process and how long you spend researching before beginning a play?
oh wow, I never thought research was a big part of writing, especially in my genre, comedy. But you can't get far without going to a computer just for those little details. I write a lot about tea for some reason. I have tea in a lot of plays, and I'm always going to, I'm looking up the names, Iron Goddess, Oolong. I need to have those kind of details. So, yeah, Google is my friend.
And are you a tea drinker or a coffee drinker?
I've become a tea drinker.
Tea drinker.
But not the fancy teas that I write about. I don't know why tea keeps coming up.
Isn't that interesting?
How about bubble tea?
Bubble tea.
No.
Maybe in the next one.
I'm not in that whole
No?
thing.
Have you ever tried it?
Yes. Yes, I have. My son made me do it. I've written about bubble tea and things that have textures I don't like. I'm happy that bubble tea exists so that I can write about
It's fun to say.
bubble tea. It is fun to say.
My daughters convinced me to go get bubble tea. We were in Chinatown, and I had no idea. I look up at the board, and there had to be 50 different types of tea. So I just said to the lady, "Can you pick a tea for me? Like, what's good?" And she looked at me like very frustrated. I had 4 kids with me. She kind of wanted me out of the store. She picked Iron Goddess.
No way.
Yeah. And so she picked Iron Goddess. We're like, sure, that sounds good. And it was like a half a fortune for 5 of us to get this tea. And my youngest at the time maybe was 6 or 7. And we go walking down Chinatown. We're going to go shopping for, $3 shoes. And she yells, "I just swallowed a slug." The tapioca in it was like that big.
It's like, don't use that word. Just don't even use it.
The tapioca or the slug?
Slug I can take. Tapioca is gross.
Now let's take a minute to thank one of the sponsors who made today's show possible, Bay of Quinte Tourism. If you're looking for something fun to do in the Quinte region, then look no further than Bay of Quinte Tourism. They have it all planned out for you. Grab a copy of the 8th edition of the Bay of Quinte Discovery Guide to start planning your next adventure in the Quinte region.
Influencers. Did you have an influencer?
My father and my brother, mostly, from back when I was young. I don't have a big background in theater. I've written more plays than I had seen at the time I started writing. I didn't have a theater background. I saw some high school musicals when I was 12.
So you're really making shit up then.
I am making shit up. I'm making everything up. Yeah, it's. I find with most things, it was the same with visual art. When you learn how to do it properly, it screws you up. I have found for the most part. So I like the fact that I sort of self-taught and throw myself into things, and I've learned over the last couple of years. This has been a great time to learn things about theater because Zoom. I won't say why we have Zoom, but because of Zoom, there's great playwriting talents have been able to just get on Zoom and do workshops that I could never afford to go to or in the past. So
It's okay to put some context to this. I mean, if someone's listening to this 5 years down the road, they're going to be, why are you doing plays on Zoom? But you guys, I mean, we can give a little plug to River in Maine and Theater in the Wings. River in Maine, that play that you guys actually had guests from all over Canada or farther, I don't know, on Zoom. You had somebody from Vancouver. Didn't you have people?
Well, we did. People from Vancouver did my plays. Doing things local is a huge part of what we do. But there are, and outside of the theater, there are workshops from great Canadian playwrights and great American playwrights that people like myself had access to, where I'd never have access to them before. Doing plays on Zoom, I hope never to have to do that again. There have been some good Zoom plays. Theater is it's about sharing the experience in a room and sharing the same air. You know, there is a word for doing things called television or film, but that's not theater. And so, sorry, Zoom theater people.
But live's where it's at.
Live is where it's at, yeah.
You mentioned River and Main Theatre Company. Can you tell us a little bit about River and Main and your involvement with Theatre in the Wings?
Sure. River and Main Theatre Company came about 7 years ago, I think. There was a certain time, there was an election in the United States of America.
Oh, God.
The first time that we all know what happened. And someone asked me, "Are you going to write a play about Donald Trump?" And I said, "Why would I write a play about Donald Trump?" And I said it would have a shelf life about a month. Was I wrong? But I thought, if I was to write a play about Donald Trump, what would it be? And I decided I wrote an allegory, a short story about the election of the president. They were electing a new president of the Chamber of Commerce in this little town of Rosewood, and things kind of went off the rails. And a friend of mine who was an actor read that and said, "Oh, this is gold. You gotta write me a show based on these stories." So within 4 days, I had 3 or 4 stories written, and that became a one-man show that my friend Rick Zimmerman did, which was called "This is Rosewood Tales from the Tavern."
There we go.
And we got some support. Actually, we got some support. Thank you, City of Belleville. We got some support through the Arts and Culture Fund for our first to develop and get it on the road. We had no home at the time, so it was a touring show. We did it, all across, from Picton to Belleville to Tweed. All the major cities,
all the big players.
But when we got that grant, we needed to have some entity to cash the check. So we formed at the time. It was an ad hoc collective, according to the
rules of that
the rules
grant.
of and also the rules of Ontario business structures. And we were looking for a name, and the main intersection in the fictional town of Rosewood is River and Main.
Oh.
So Rick had the idea. We called it River and Main Theater. There's a story in the book about something that happens at River and Main with a dog show and a cat show. Different merchants associations had them on the same weekend, and there was an incident with 3 boxers and a trampoline. So we figured anytime anybody asked about River and Main, we could just, it has to do with 3 boxers and a trampoline. Anyway, this is way too long an answer for the question. But then we ended up with an actual bricks and mortar location, which, there's a wonderful building that already came with these beautiful wings painted on the side. So we decided to call that Theatre in the Wings, the entity that we have all of our business stuff, which we are now a federally incorporated not-for-profit, but it's all registered under River and Main Theatre Company, and so we are River and Main Theatre Company at Theatre in the Wings.
Telling stories, making shit up.
Making shit up.
Okay, I had a brain question.
Okay.
And didn't that This is Rosewood have anything to do with pie?
There was pie involved, yes. There was definitely pie involved, yes. The main characters were Stanley, and Earl, and the 3 Stanleys and Earl met every week for pie at Earl's Cafe. So there was much pie involved. And there was also pizza, which is
A pizza pie.
Yes, it was Ahmed's Pizza. There's much about pizza in pie.
Do we want to do a brain bowl? Brain bowl?
Peter, you go ahead and grab a question. No one can blame anybody. It's Peter's fault.
Okay. If you could have the power of teleportation right now, where would you go and why? I think I would go to the West End of London to see a show and to visit a theater. As I said, I don't have a big theater background, and I've never gone to, any big theaters. But I'm very much attracted to the theater in London, so I would go there.
England.
England. Oh yeah. No, Ontario.
Do you know
yes,
the name
England.
of it?
No, any theater.
Any theater.
Any of the theaters in the West End. It's a pretty cool place, as I understand it. I've never been anywhere, but my second choice would be Wooler, just
Because
I've heard
Wooler, Ontario?
Yeah, I've heard wonderful things
Okay.
about Wooler.
Just go out to the 401.
And now, let's take a minute to thank one of the sponsors who made today's show possible. The City of Belleville supports the arts through the Arts and Culture Fund and the Mayor's Week of the Arts. If you're in the mood to look at art, take a stroll through the John M. Parrott Art Gallery, Belleville's premier publicly supported art gallery, which receives 93% of its operating fund from the city. If you're looking for a publicly funded museum, then take a stroll down Bridge Street to visit the Glenmore Museum and National Historic Site, home to artifacts reflecting the history of the Belleville region.
Here at the QAC, we value partnerships and working together. Does playwriting require any kind of collaboration?
Oh my gosh, playwriting. Maybe filmmaking is more collaborative, but I think playwriting is totally collaborative, and that's what I love about it. And I kind of say that playwrights are kind of lazy because we do like 25% of the work. But we write a script and then we hand it off to a director, who takes it another, 25%, who gives it to actors, who takes it another 25%, who give it to an audience, who takes it beyond what a playwright could ever imagine. That's one of the things I totally love about writing for the stage. Playwriting is collaborative.
You bounce shit off of people?
Well, I give people shit and then they make better shit out of it is, I think, the way.
And do you
goes.
get some credit for the shit?
I get probably too much credit, maybe.
Not enough
Not
credit?
enough. It's all ego, right? So you never get enough. But I love sitting in the audience when one of my plays is on. And, when I'm centered out, it's great. But I just love when people swarm the actors because that means you've written good stuff for them. I didn't know that at first, that you write for actors. You don't write for an audience. You don't write for yourself. You're writing for actors. And if you do that, then the actors will take it to the audience for you.
And
I love actors.
are you writing with certain actors in mind?
I used to do that, and for the first maybe 4 or 5 plays that I wrote, all of the actors had the names of the people that were in my mind. And a few of them actually ended up taking on the roles that I wrote, but I soon realized that you're limiting yourself when you do that, and it's better to just, and it becomes easier as you run along. And all of my, whatever 7 years of playwriting, I've learned this.
And what is the best part of your work?
The experience of writing is great. When you're writers, you probably understand the zone. When you're in the zone and you're writing, there's nothing better. It's just great, just that experience. And you're in the room either by yourself or, in my case, when I'm in the zone, Lisa knows it. My partner, she knows when I'm having fun. And that's the first part. And then the second part is definitely being in the audience when one of your plays is, especially when it's, it goes well.
Yeah.
And the audience. I had one of the great experiences of my life was being in the audience at a play that everything went well. And someone in the audience, this was at a festival near Ottawa, and somebody in the audience said, "That guy wrote that play." And I was swarmed. So that felt pretty good.
Got some roadies in Ottawa?
It's all an ego kind of thing. But, yeah.
Well, I think it would be fun to watch audience reaction.
Oh, yeah, it's great. And as I said, especially I like making people laugh. So when that happens, it sort of feeds what it feeds my soul.
So, did carving, you've switched from carving. I know, I'm
Yes.
back to carving. Let's circle back to carving.
Well,
No.
as probably the world's biggest collector of my work,
Aren't you going to do
I'm
some
sure
more?
you're hoping I'm
Do you
going
need some
to
more
die
wood?
and my work will go up in value. But thank you for supporting me, by the way.
Buying some carvings. No, but did it, I mean, they're two completely different disciplines. Do you still whittle, carve, think about it, or it's all writing right now?
It's all writing right now. I was for a number of years I did the awards for the local films at DocFest, and then for a couple of years that was the only thing that I did all year, and they stopped asking me, so now I don't do anything.
So, not a typical job.
No.
Is there do you have a muse, something that inspires you? And then when you start writing, what does your day look like?
There's a couple of ways that a play or piece of work gets started. One is a story. If there's a story you want to tell, you find a way to tell it, and then everything comes together, and that's just automatic. You can't even keep up with the characters. You're just writing down what they say in your head as fast as you can, and you can't keep up with them. And then sometimes it's character driven. You find a character or group of characters that you like, and you put them in a situation and find out what happens. But I don't remember what the question is. But I don't.
We're start throwing 2 and 3 part questions out at Peter. So
But I never know where a play's going to go when I start it. I've been to so many workshops with different playwrights over the last couple of years, and there are 2 kinds of playwrights: those that have and have to have the whole story before they start, and those that start and find out where it goes. And I'm definitely in that second group. The other ones bug me, but.
Do you find that process energizing or exhausting?
Oh, I find it energizing. It's so much fun to have people speaking in your head, and it's exciting to, I wrote a line just the other day, and it's just like it just amused me for 3 days, and it's nothing really, it's a throwaway line, but I just love it.
keeps coming back, pops up. You're using it.
Oh yeah, it's in the piece I'm working on now.
You're using it in the context of every day, though?
Well, no. Well, I can't, because the line is, why? Why Harry? Because it's 1922. I don't know why.
That's probably
I just love that
hilarious.
line.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what it means yet.
You're writing, you're going to make it mean
Yeah,
something.
I know it fits in somewhere.
So when you get in the zone and you're writing,
Mm-hmm.
you're in the zone.
Oh, yeah.
You lose track of time.
Yes. Oh, yes.
What's that look like for you? Lisa has to go for
Lisa's
stay at her relatives.
we have no normal days, so every day's, whatever happens. Although having a theater to run now, our schedule is much busier than it's ever been. But still, there's still lots of time to write and do things. And I'm not one of those people who sits down and thinks, okay, I'm gonna. There's one playwright that he starts at 5:30 every morning, and works for 3 hours, and then stops and works for another 3 hours, and it's like, wow, it's
very disciplined.
It's very I'm not that guy.
Have you ever read A Movable Feast?
No.
So Hemingway was like that. He got up in the morning.
Yeah.
I think Hadley was his wife at the time. She was in another room sleeping. They had an apartment in Switzerland or something. And he'd sit down at the table, and 5:30 until lunch. He was very disciplined. Start up again. But then in the evening, it was friends.
Yeah. There have been periods where we just work all the time, so it's not like we have a routine, but the routine is, has been just working. I mean, there were at least a couple of years where midnight on January 31st, we would be sitting there working on something and just look up and go, oh, look, it's a new year. But yeah, I mean, we love working. So yeah, I'm lucky to have a partner who this is sort of the same way. She can't stop working. So that's the difficult part. I can stop sometimes.
Sometimes.
Although actually no, when I'm in the
You're in the zone,
when I'm
get
in the
in.
zone, I'll be up 5 or 6 times a night because a line will come to me and I have to go write it down.
If you don't, somebody else will.
Yeah.
Somebody else will get that line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never thought of it that way.
And I have heard people talk about around the 12th or the 16th hour of working on something, some really good stuff comes out.
Oh yeah.
You're on a roll.
You're on a roll. And I'm also a big rewriter. I find the 13th draft almost as fun as the first.
Wow.
I don't know when to stop.
He's a little crazy.
That's my biggest challenge. And it's for...
You're always tweaking it, always making it better.
Always tweaking it. I can't read one of my plays without rewriting it. And you've got to learn to do that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So many... One great Canadian playwright, who I can't remember who it was at the moment, he said he had the same problem, and then he realized that the person, especially his early plays, the person that wrote that is a different person, and he had to understand that, and he had to respect that person who wrote that play. I'm not there yet, but that sounds good.
And so that playwright leaves it?
He leaves it. He said he won't touch the play anymore. He won't touch the play that younger version of himself wrote. Sounds profound.
What advice do you have for someone who wants to get into playwriting?
Write plays. It's as simple as that. Just start writing. There's no big secret to it. And especially if you have a story, find a way to tell it. And if you don't have a story, writing for the stage, that whole, dramatic process is easy. To come up with a story is easy. You give someone a name, find out what they do, find out what they want, find out what's stopping them from getting it, and you write the story. You've got it right there. That's drama.
You got the challenge.
That's it. That's all there is.
Just write it.
Yeah.
And keep writing.
Keep writing, yeah.
All right. Well, if you can be remembered for one thing, what's it going to be and why?
I got to go back to making people laugh. And making people cry is probably the
Second best.
And that's kind of what I'm, what I hope to achieve. When I write what I want to write, it's I want that roller coaster. I want to take the audience to the verge of tears sometimes, or it doesn't have to be tears, but to take them to the place where they're thinking about something, but leave them laughing at the end.
I think that's my favorite thing. Listening, I just want to laugh. It makes everybody feel so good, and it must feel good that they're laughing about something you wrote.
Yeah. It's funny. Here I go continuing. I've tried acting a couple of times, and I feel like a fraud because people are laughing, and I'm thinking, you don't laugh at me. It's the person who wrote it. You should be laughing. I don't know.
But the same thing, I think, there's good stories out there.
Oh.
But if you're not a good storyteller, you're not going to tell that story. And if you're not, an actor has to take those words and deliver them so that they're funny.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. As I said, I love actors. Thank God they're out there. Thank God you're out there.
Well, thank you, Peter.
Oh, you're welcome.
This was fantastic. We've learned a lot about storytelling and playwriting and making people laugh and then turning around and making them cry and how great that is. And that's it from the QAC podcast. This is your Potterators, Cody, Janet, and Lynn signing off. Remember, always make shit up. You can find more about Peter's work at...
The easiest way to find out about my work is go to the Playwrights Guild of Canada website and just put my name in the search bar, and you'll find out about me and my plays. Or the Canadian Play Outlet, which is just another extension of the Playwrights Guild of Canada. Thank you, Playwrights Guild of Canada.
Playwrights Guild of Canada and Canadian
Play Outlet, which can be found at canadianplayoutlet.ca.
Perfect. That's great. Well, thanks. Remember, always make stuff up.